These next stretches are for the hip flexors. So the muscles that make up the hip flexors are the iliopsoas muscle, which is made up of the psoas and the iliacus, and the rectus femoris muscle, which crosses the hip and the knee. So we can get short, tight hip flexors from prolonged sitting, especially those people who work at a desk. And the issue with that is we then lose what's called functional hip extension. So while walking or running, the hip doesn't extend properly, and that changes the biomechanics in the pelvis. And then the way the body compensates is it'll go and recruit the postural muscles, especially in the low back, to try and stabilize the low back, because now the pelvis is moving abnormally, and now it's going to compensate and use those big postural muscles to try and stabilize everything. And that will give people the ongoing sensation of low back tightness or stiffness, where the actual cause is coming from the hip flexors. And that's why this is an important stretch to consider. So to do this iliopsoas muscle, you stretch this leg, you get into a lunge position, and what you're going to do, you're going to just shift your hips forward so that this hip extends. But when you get into this position, make sure that you keep your abdominals and your glutes contracted. If you don't, you end up just extending the lumbar spine and you're not actually stretching that hip. So again, keep the abdominals tight, keep the glutes contracted, and then you're going to just shift forward, and you can accentuate that stretch just by leaning over towards the opposite side, and you should feel it stretching down the front of that hip. Now, to stretch the rectus femoris muscle, what you want to do is you want to extend the hip and flex the knee at the same time. So one way you can do that is place a cushion next to a wall, and then what you're going to do is you're going to extend the hip, flex the knee, and then just sit back into the wall. And now you should feel that stretch in the front of the hip and in part of your quads. And again, you're going to just hold that stretch 15 to 20 seconds, 3 times on both sides.